Walter Hutchins made coffee the old way that February morning. Percolator on the gas stove, 4 scoops, same as the last 40 years. The kitchen was cold enough to see his breath until the burner caught. Gray light came through the window over the sink, thin and flat like it couldn't quite commit to the day. His grandson Nathan sat at the table picking at pancakes, not eating. The boy had stayed over again. Third time that week, his parents working late, his daughter Rebecca said. Walter didn't mind. Grandkids were always welcome. Nathan set down his fork, looked at his plate, then up at Walter with eyes that carried something heavy. "Grandpa," he said, quiet as snow falling, "why does Grandma text someone named DM after you fall asleep?" Linda appeared in the doorway. Her face went white as February ice. The coffee cup in her hand stopped halfway to the counter, just hung there. Then she recovered, voice sharp enough to cut. "That's grown-up business, Nathan." As the boy shrank into his chair, whispered, "Sorry." Walter looked at his wife's face, knew instantly. That flash of panic was unmistakable. The pancakes went cold on the table. That night, Walter pretended to sleep. His wife's phone lit the dark 17 times before midnight. He counted each one, hating himself for counting, unable to stop. Linda had an explanation by late morning, after Nathan left for school. She found Walter at the kitchen table, reviewing survey maps for a job coming up. Sat down across from him with that sympathy card in her hand. The kind you buy at Walgreens, flowers on the front, pre-printed condolences inside. "That's for Diane Morrison," she said. "Remember my friend from college? She's going through cancer treatments down in Florida. I didn't want to worry you with someone else's troubles." Walter looked at the card, at his wife's face, wanted so badly to believe her. Why is Nathan asking about it? Kids notice everything. Linda touched his arm. "First time in weeks. He must have seen her name on my phone. I text her late because of the time difference. She can't sleep much these days." She even pulled up a Facebook profile. Showed him photos of a woman in her 50s. Diane Morrison, Tampa. Recent posts about treatment schedules. "I should have told you," Linda said. Her eyes had that wet shine. Performance or genuine shame? Walter couldn't tell anymore. "I just didn't want to add more worry to your plate." He nodded, let himself believe it. For 2 days, he almost did. Tuesday came, recycling day. Walter was up past midnight, couldn't sleep when he noticed the bin by the back door overflowing. Linda had been decluttering lately, taking out trash herself, which wasn't like her. He grabbed the bin to consolidate before morning pickup. That's when he saw it. Phone bill, torn in half, buried under old envelopes and junk mail. He pulled it out, smoothed the pieces on the kitchen counter. The furnace clicked on in the basement, the only sound in the house. 247 text messages, all to the same number, all in the past month. The number had a 3117 area code. Indianapolis Metro, local, not Florida, not anywhere near Florida. Walter stood there, in his socks on the cold linoleum, reading the same line over and over. 247 text. To someone 20 minutes away, not 1,000 miles south. He wrote the number in his survey notebook. The small one he kept for property measurements. Same careful block letters he'd used for 40 years. Same precision, just a different kind of boundary being mapped now. Upstairs, through the ceiling, he heard Linda shift in their bed. The mattress springs creaked. Her phone buzzed once, then silence. Walter made coffee, sat at the kitchen table until dawn. Didn't drink it, just watched it go cold while February light came gray through the window. Tuesday morning, 7 a.m., Kowalski's Diner. Same vinyl booth by the window Walter had sat in every week for 15 years. Art, Bill, and Jean were already there when he arrived. Barb brought 4 coffees without asking. Black, all of them. She'd been bringing 4 coffees to this booth since 2010. "Cold enough for you?" Art said. He was 67, retired from the county clerk's office. Careful with his words, methodical. Had a yellow legal pad on the table like always, fountain pen clipped to his shirt pocket. "Ground's still frozen solid," Walter said. "Can't do boundary work till it thaws." Bill Crawford nodded. Former state police, 30 years, 65 now, divorced twice, lived alone in a neat ranch house where everything had its place. Saw the road crews trying to patch Route 36 yesterday. Asphalt won't set in this cold. They'll be back out there come April doing it again. Gene Bartlett just grunted. He was 70, the oldest of them. Equipment operator, retired. Said more with silence than most men said with speeches. They talked weather, county politics. Gene's truck needing a water pump. The comfortable rhythms of men who'd been meeting every Tuesday for long enough that gaps in conversation didn't need filling. Walter was quieter than usual. Art noticed. Didn't press, just noticed. That was the thing about Art. He saw details other people missed. Came from all those years working with property records, Walter figured. Courthouse is getting renovated, Bill mentioned. New roof, marble steps getting repointed. Judge Keller's complaining about the noise during proceedings. "She's still taking cases?" Art asked. Everyone she can get. Woman 60-something? Should be thinking about retirement? Instead, she's there every morning at 8 sharp. Walter paid his bill first. Unusual. Usually they split the check or took turns. He left a 5 on the table and headed out to his truck without his usual second cup. Art watched him through the window. Saw Walter sit in the cab for a minute before starting the engine. Something's eating at him, Art said, quiet. Jean nodded. Bill set down his coffee cup with a soft clink. He'll tell us when he's ready, Bill said. They were wrong about the when, but right about the telling. The phone number sat in Walter's notebook like a splinter he couldn't ignore. That night, after Linda left for errands, he looked at it again. 317 area code. He could call it. Could find out who answered. But he already knew, didn't he? That sick feeling in his gut wasn't doubt. It was certainty, trying to find a voice. Linda came home at 8:30. Shopping bags from stores she hadn't shopped at in years, humming while she put things away. She seemed lighter somehow, younger. Walter sat in his chair in the living room, reading the same page of a farming magazine 3 times, not absorbing a word. Through the wall, that night, he heard her in the guest room. When had she moved to the guest room? He tried to remember. A week ago? 2? Her voice came through, muffled but unmistakable. Soft, almost girlish, laughing at something someone said. He looked at the clock. 11:47 p.m. She was still talking at midnight. Walter lay there counting minutes because he couldn't stop listening, couldn't make himself get up and leave the house, couldn't do anything but lie there while his marriage bled out. One whispered conversation at a time. At 12:23, she finally stopped. The house settled into its old wood creaks and furnace cycling silence. Walter stared at the ceiling until dawn. The phone bill was still in his survey notebook. The number still there? 247 text to someone local, someone she laughed with after midnight, someone who wasn't Diane Morrison, in Florida, fighting cancer. Some lies were small enough to ignore. Some were too big to unsee. Walter figured he'd just crossed that line, whether he wanted to or not. Walter walked his property line on a Thursday morning, first time in 2 years. The northwest quadrant, where his father had planted black walnut trees back in 1953. 20 acres of timber and pasture. The back 40 they'd always called it, even though it was only 20. The ground crunched under his boots. Frozen solid still, though the sun was trying. His breath came out in clouds. A crow called from somewhere in the bare branches. That's when he saw it. Orange surveyor's flag. Bright against the gray-brown winter landscape. Tied to a metal stake driven into the frozen ground, Walter stopped. Stood there, looking at it like it was a snake that had appeared in his path. He walked closer, knelt down. The stake was fresh, professional grade, the kind surveyors use for boundary work, had markings on the flag, Lot 7. His father's walnut trees rose 40 feet behind the stake. 70 years of growth, Walter had climbed them as a boy. He pulled out his phone, took a photo, checked his GPS coordinates. Then he walked the line, found 6 more stakes, all fresh, all marked with lot numbers. Someone had divided his father's farm into a subdivision grid while he slept. The question wasn't who'd planted them. The question was who'd paid for it. The county clerk's office smelled like old paper and copier toner. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Walter stood at the counter while a young woman pulled up records on her computer. Property survey requests, she said, clicking through screens. For your address. Okay, here we go. Work order filed January 8th, preliminary subdivision plat. Who requested it? She looked at him over her reading glasses. Says here, Linda Hutchins. Is that your wife? Walter's jaw tightened. What else does it say? Payment from joint account. Survey completed January 20th. Plat filed with the county February 2nd. More clicking. Requesting party is listed as Meadowbrook Development, LLC. Can I get copies of that? Sure thing. Give me a few minutes. Walter waited by the window, watched cars in the parking lot. Ordinary people doing ordinary business. None of them finding out their wife had been subdividing their land behind their back. The clerk came back with a folder. That'll be $8 for copies. Walter paid. Took the folder to his truck before opening it. The subdivision plat showed 7 lots. Estate-style cabin sites, the description said. Starting price $485,000. Meadowbrook Estates, written in serif font across the top. Someone had already named the place where his father's trees stood. Someone had made it pretty for brochures. The work order had Linda's signature, right there in blue ink, clear as day, notarized and everything. Walter drove home with the folder on the seat beside him. His hands were steady on the wheel. That surprised him. He thought they'd shake. But they didn't. They were just still. Like they were waiting for the rest of him to catch up to what his eyes had seen. Linda was at the kitchen table when he got home. Laptop open, spreadsheets on the screen. She looked up when he came in. Walter set the folder down in front of her, didn't say anything. Just set it there and waited. She opened it. Her face didn't change much, just a tightness around her mouth. You've been checking up on me. I found survey stakes in the back 40. In Dad's walnut trees? Those trees are 70 years old, Walter. They're not productive. The land's not productive. We're sitting on $500,000 doing nothing with it. That land's been in my family since 1947. Linda closed the laptop, stood up. And what's it gotten us? You do survey work for other people's property while ours just sits there. We could retire. Actually retire, not this half-working thing you do. You signed the work order without telling me. I'm on the deed. I can request a survey. You're planning to subdivide my father's farm. Her voice went sharp. Our farm, Walter. I've lived here 38 years. I gave up my career for this place. For you. I think I've earned the right to want something better. Better than what? Than this. She gestured at the kitchen, the house, everything. Being broke on a dead farm in the middle of nowhere, watching you measure other people's property lines for $20 an hour. I deserve more than this. I deserve half of everything, minimum. Walter looked at his wife, really looked at her. The woman he'd married 38 years ago was somewhere in there, but he couldn't find her anymore. You planning on asking me, or were you just gonna do it? I'm asking now, aren't I? Linda's eyes were cold. Meadowbrook wants to partner with us. They handle everything. Permits, infrastructure, marketing. We'd get 40% of sales. That's nearly $4 million. Walter, when was the last time you made $4 million measuring fence lines? When was the last time you texted Diane Morrison in Florida? Linda went still, just for a second. Then she grabbed her laptop and walked out. He heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard the guest room door close, not slam close, like she'd been planning this move for a while and was just executing it now. That night, through the guest room wall, Walter heard her voice again, soft, girlish, laughing. He lay in the bed they'd shared for 38 years and listened to his wife fall in love with someone else in a room 10 feet away. At 11:47, she was still talking. Walter stared at the ceiling and thought about his father walking those same property lines, planting those walnut trees when Eisenhower was president, how he'd said, "A man who knows his boundaries knows himself." His father had known his boundaries. Walter had thought he knew his too. Turned out he'd been wrong about where the lines were drawn, wrong about a lot of things. The house settled around him, old wood creaking, familiar sounds in an unfamiliar silence. Outside, February wind moved through bare branches. Inside, his wife laughed at something someone said. Someone who wasn't him. Someone who wanted his father's trees cut down and turned into cabin lots for rich people from Indianapolis. Walter closed his eyes, didn't sleep, just closed them and waited for dawn. Some nights, that's all a man can do. The days that followed had a hollow quality to them. Walter made coffee every morning, still 4 scoops, still the percolator. But the ritual felt mechanical now. Something he did because he'd always done it, not because it meant anything. Linda left early, came back late. They moved around each other like strangers in a boarding house. She'd taken all her things to the guest room. Her side of the closet was empty except for the hangers, which rattled when he walked past. Walter went through the motions, checked his survey equipment, answered calls about jobs, paid bills on time, fixed the screen door hinge that had been squeaking for a month. All the things a man does when he doesn't know what else to do. At night, he'd sit in his chair with a farming magazine open on his lap, reading the same articles over and over without absorbing a word. Through the wall, Linda's voice would drift in, soft conversations that went late, laughter he hadn't heard from her in years, maybe ever. The phone bill sat in his survey notebook. He'd check it sometimes, compulsively, like checking a wound to see if it was still bleeding. It always was. Nathan's teacher called on a Thursday. "Mr. Hutchins, this is Mrs. Henderson, Nathan's teacher." Walter was in his truck outside the hardware store. He'd been sitting there for 10 minutes, engine off, not quite ready to go inside where he might see people he knew. "Is everything all right?" he asked. "That's what I wanted to ask you." Her voice had that careful quality teachers use when they're worried, but don't want to overstep. "Nathan's been in the nurse's office 3 times this week with stomach aches. He's not himself in class. Withdrawn. His grades are slipping." Walter felt something tighten in his chest. "He asked me something yesterday," Mrs. Henderson continued. "Asked if keeping secrets makes you sick. I thought I should reach out, make sure everything's okay at home." "Everything's fine," Walter heard himself say. The lie tasted like copper. "I'll check in with him." I'd appreciate that. He's a good boy. I just want to make sure he's all right." Walter thanked her and hung up. Sat there in the truck cab while February cold seeped in through the door seals. Nathan had asked if secrets make you sick. The boy already knew the answer. He was living it. 10 years old. carrying his grandmother's affair like a stone in his pocket, stomach aches at school, falling grades, and Walter had been so wrapped up in his own pain, he hadn't noticed his grandson drowning right in front of him. He put his head against the steering wheel. 20 minutes passed before he could make himself get out and go into the store. Bill Crawford was at the paint counter when Walter came through the door, saw him, walked over. No preamble, no small talk. "You all right?" Walter picked up a package of fence staples he didn't need. "Fine, just busy. Season's coming." Bill studied him. 30 years as a state trooper meant he could read a man's face like a map. "You look like hell, Walter." Been a long winter." "That all it is?" Walter met his eyes, wanted to say something, wanted to open his mouth and let it all spill out. The texts, the survey stakes, Linda in the guest room, Nathan's stomach aches. But the words stuck somewhere in his throat. "I'm fine," he said again. Bill nodded slowly, didn't believe him, that was clear, but he didn't press either, just said Tuesday, 7 a.m., don't skip. He walked away before Walter could respond. Left Walter standing there holding fence staples he didn't need, feeling like a man who'd just missed his only exit on a long highway. He paid for the staples. Drove home the long way, avoiding Main Street where people might recognize his truck and wave. The house was empty when he got there. Linda's car was gone. He stood in the kitchen, looking at the folder of subdivision documents still on the table where she'd left them. Meadowbrook Estates, 7 lots. His father's trees marked for clearing. He picked up the folder, put it in his survey notebook. Evidence, that's what this was now. Evidence of something he didn't fully understand yet, but knew was wrong. The silence in the house was complete. No furnace running, no voices through walls, just old wood settling and the distant sound of wind and bare branches outside. Walter had never felt more alone in his life. Sunday evening, Jean called. Walter almost didn't answer. Saw the name on his phone and thought about letting it go to voicemail. But Jean never called. In 15 years of Tuesday mornings, Jean had never once called between meetings. "Yeah, Tuesday." Jean's voice was gravel and certainty. 7 a.m., be there. "Jean, not a question, not a request." The line went dead. Walter stood there with the phone in his hand. Through the guest room wall, he heard Linda's voice. Still talking, still laughing. It was 7:15 p.m. on a Sunday. He looked at the phone, at the survey notebook on the counter, at the empty coffee cup by the sink. At 40 years of his life, arranged in this kitchen, this house, this farm his father left him. Tuesday was 2 days away. Jean said be there. Not a question, not a request. Walter opened his mouth to argue with a dial tone, then realized what he was doing and set the phone down. Some decisions get made for you. Some friends don't give you the option of drowning alone. He made coffee, even though it was evening, sat at the kitchen table with his survey notebook open, started writing dates, times, facts, the phone bill, the survey stakes, the subdivision plat, Linda's signature, all of it laid out in the same careful block letters he'd used for boundary work since he was 23. If he was going to tell them Tuesday, and Jean's voice said he was going to tell them Tuesday, then he'd better have his measurements right. His father always said, do it once, do it right, do it so it holds up when somebody checks your work. Walter wrote until 2 a.m., 12 pages, every date he could remember, every detail that mattered. The same precision he'd used mapping property lines for 40 years, now mapping the boundaries of Betrayal. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, through the wall, silence finally. Linda had stopped talking. The house settled into sleep. Walter closed the notebook. Tomorrow was Monday. Tuesday was coming, whether he was ready or not. He wasn't ready, but Jean hadn't given him a choice. Some things you measure because they matter. Some things you measure so they can't be denied. Walter figured he'd just spent 4 hours measuring something that fell into both categories. Tuesday morning, Walter was 15 minutes early to Kowalski's. Pulled into the lot at 6:45 and sat in his truck watching the sun try to break through February clouds. Art's sedan was already there. So was Bill's F-150, Jean's old Dodge with the dent in the tailgate. They were waiting for him. Walter picked up his survey notebook from the passenger seat, felt the weight of 12 pages, all those measurements and dates. A lifetime of quiet competence reduced to evidence of failure. He almost started the truck and drove away, but Jean hadn't given him that option. And somewhere in the last 4 days, Walter had stopped having the energy to keep pretending everything was fine. He got out, walked into the diner. The 3 men were in the booth, by the window, their usual spot. But they were all on the same side, leaving the other side empty, waiting. Barb brought 4 coffees without a word, set them down gentle, and walked away. She'd been serving coffee to this booth for 14 years. Knew when to talk and when to leave men alone. Walter slid into the empty side, set his notebook on the table. Looked at 3 faces he'd seen every Tuesday since Art retired from the county in 2010. Nobody spoke for a long minute. Just the diner, sounds around them, Route 36 traffic outside, coffee cups on Formica. "I need to tell you something," Walter said. Art pushed his coffee aside. Bill set his cup down, slow and careful. Gene's jaw worked like he was chewing words he wouldn't say yet. Walter opened the notebook, started talking, told them about Nathan's question at breakfast, Linda's face going white, the phone bill and the recycling with 247 text to a local number, the survey stakes in his father's walnut trees, the subdivision plat filed without him knowing, Linda's signature on documents. Meadowbrook Development, LLC, the guest room, the voices through the wall, Nathan's stomach aches. All of it. He talked for 10 minutes straight. Longest speech he'd made since his wedding vows 38 years ago. When he finished, the coffee had gone cold. Barb had refilled it twice without him noticing. Art sat back, studied Walter's face. You got those documents with you? Walter pulled the folder from his notebook. Subdivision plat, survey work order, phone bill copies. All of it organized the way he'd organize a survey report. Art read through it, passed pages to Bill. Bill read them like he was back in uniform reviewing evidence for a case file. Gene just watched Walter. Didn't need to see the papers. He'd heard enough. How long you been carrying this alone? Gene asked. His voice was quiet. Since Nathan asked. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Gene shook his head. Damn it, Walter. I didn't want to. Walter stopped. Didn't know how to finish that sentence. Didn't want to what? Admit failure. Look weak. Burden friends with his problems. Didn't want to ask for help. Gene finished for him. I know. Did the same thing in '09. Watched my marriage fall apart for 6 months before I told anybody. By then it was too late to save anything. Lost half my savings, the house, damn near lost my mind. Bill looked up from the documents. This subdivision plat, she filed it 8 weeks ago. You're on the deed, right? Added her name 3 years ago. For estate planning, she said. That was the setup. Bill's voice had that cop flatness. Statement of fact, no emotion. This isn't impulse, Walter. This is planned. Art tapped the LLC registration with his finger. Meadowbrook Development. You know who runs that? No idea. I can find out. Still, got friends at the county. Someone filed this. Someone's got plans for your land. He pulled out his yellow legal pad, the fountain pen from his shirt pocket. You need to document everything, every conversation, every text you can verify. Every date something changed. Make it systematic. He slid the legal pad across the table. Walter stared at it. Clean yellow pages, graph paper lines. Art's neat handwriting across the top. Documentation log, W. Hutchins. I don't know if I can... You're a surveyor, Art said. You've been documenting boundaries for 40 years. This is just a different kind of boundary. Same principles apply. Bill leaned forward. Phone records. You need official copies with account details. Screenshots won't hold up if this goes to court. Request them from the carrier. They have to provide them if you're on the account. Court? Maybe. Depends how she plays it. Bill's expression was grim. But documentation is everything. Chain of custody, dated entries, witness statements. You do it right from the start, you've got options. You do it sloppy, you've got nothing. I already wrote some stuff down, Walter said, touching his survey notebook. That's good. Keep doing it. Every day. Times, dates, what was said, who was there, like you're documenting a property line. Exact same discipline. Gene spoke up. I waited too long. Told myself it would work out. Told myself she'd come back around. Kept hoping instead of acting. He looked at Walter dead on. Worst mistake I made. Don't make it because I did. Barb came by with the coffee pot. Topped off all 4 cups even though they were still half full. Set down a slice of apple pie in front of Walter. He hadn't ordered it. On the house, she said, not quite looking at him. Small-town care delivered through dessert. She walked away before he could thank her. Walter looked at the pie, at the legal pad, at 3 men who'd rearranged their Tuesday morning to sit on the same side of a booth and wait for him to stop drowning. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, he said. His voice cracked on the last word. 40 years of holding steady, and his voice picked now to break. You keep measuring, Art said. Same as you always have. But you measure this now. Make it real on paper so it can't be denied later. And you let us stand beside you while you do it, Bill added. Gene just squeezed Walter's shoulder. Calloused hand, rough grip. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. They sat there for another hour. Went over the documents again. Art made notes. Bill explained evidence procedures, chain of custody, dated entries, witness corroboration. Gene mostly stayed quiet, but his presence was steady as a fence post. By the time they left, Walter had a plan. Document everything. Request official phone records. Check for other changes. Deeds, bank accounts, anything Linda might have altered. Art would trace the LLC. Bill would review everything to make sure it was courtroom ready, if it came to that. In the parking lot, Art said one more thing, voice low, careful. When she changed that deed 3 years back, check what else she changed. Paper trails tell stories, Walter. You just gotta know the language. Walter drove home with the legal pad on the seat beside him, Art's handwriting across the top, a gift and a burden both. The house was empty when he got there, Linda's car gone. He stood in the kitchen for a minute, then sat down at the table, opened the legal pad to the first clean page, started writing date, time, Nathan's question at breakfast, Linda's reaction, the phone bill, the survey stakes, the subdivision plat, every detail transferred from his survey notebook to Art's legal pad. Cleaner, more systematic. The way evidence should look. He wrote for 3 hours, his hand cramped twice. The coffee went cold in the cup. But when he finished, he had something solid. Something that couldn't be argued with or explained away. The same kind of documentation he'd file with the county after completing a boundary survey. Professional. Precise. True. His father used to say, a man who knows his boundaries knows himself. Walter was learning his boundaries all over again, finding out where the lines actually were, not where he'd hoped they'd be. Outside, afternoon light came gray through the kitchen window. The house was quiet. Linda wouldn't be home for hours. Walter looked at the legal pad, 12 pages of careful documentation. The truth laid out in block letters and dated entries. Some things you build to last, some things you build because they're already falling down, and you need to show how it happened. Walter figured he'd just done both. He made fresh coffee, sat at the table while it brewed, listened to the percolator hiss and burble. 4 scoops, same as always, some rituals held. Some things stayed true even when everything else went crooked. That was something. Not much, but something. Art's legal pad sat on the table. Evidence of betrayal, yes, but also evidence of friendship, of men who showed up when called, of standing beside someone doing the hardest work of his life. Walter drank his coffee. It was bitter and strong and exactly what he needed. Tuesday was over, but the work was just beginning. Walter went back to the county office Thursday morning. Different clerk this time, older woman who knew Art from his working days. Need to see all filings related to my property, Walter said. Everything from the last 5 years. She pulled up the records, printed them without questions, 23 pages. Walter took them to his truck, went through them one by one. The subdivision plat he already knew about. But there was more. Preliminary approval hearing scheduled for April 15th, 6 weeks away. Notes in the margin, pending final co-owner signature. They were going to push it through. With his signature, or without it, Walter couldn't tell yet. But the timeline was there. April 15th. After that, his father's farm would be carved into 7 lots, whether he fought it or not. He kept reading, found the environmental assessment, traffic impact study, all filed in Linda's name, all paid from their joint account. Someone had done their homework. This wasn't a loose idea. This was an engineered plan, weeks from completion. Walter photographed every page, added them to his documentation log with dates and reference numbers. Art had been right. Paper trails told stories. This story had chapters Walter hadn't known existed. Art called Tuesday evening. Walter was at the kitchen table with his documentation spread out like survey maps. Found something? Art said. His voice was tight. Meadowbrook Development, LLC. Registered agent is Dennis Michael Morrison. Ring any bells? Walter went still. DM. That's what I thought. Ran him through property records. Owns 3 rental properties in Carmel. High-end stuff. Also cross-referenced with your wife's employer history from public records. And? Dennis Morrison was her supervisor at the insurance company. 30 years ago. Before you were married? The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, like the walls had moved inward. Art, it's not just an affair, Walter. And it's not just fraud, it's coordinated. The texts, the development plan, the timeline, they've been working together. Walter sat down. The phone felt heavy against his ear. How long you figure they've been planning this? Subdivision plat was filed 8 weeks ago, but the LLC was registered 4 months before that, December, right before Christmas. While Walter had been stringing lights on the barn, while Linda had been baking cookies for the grandkids, while he'd been thinking about whether to replace the furnace or wait another year, she'd been planning this. With her old boss, with the man she texted 247 times a month. You still there? Art asked. Yeah. There's more. Morrison filed for permits on 3 other subdivisions in the last 2 years. All rural properties. All within 20 miles of Indianapolis. Guy's making a business of turning farmland into luxury cabin developments. And Linda's helping him. Looks that way. Can't prove they're together from public records. But the business connection is clear. And if those texts line up with planning meetings, development timeline discussions... They do? Walter said. I checked. Every spike in text activity matches a filing date or approval deadline. Art was quiet for a moment. You keeping good notes on this? Every date, every number, bills, procedures. Good, because this isn't just divorce territory anymore. This is fraud, property fraud. If she's trying to force a sale without proper co-owner consent, if Morrison's involved in that, Judge Keller hates property fraud more than anything. How do you know what Judge Keller hates? Worked with her for 15 years when she was county prosecutor. Saw her take down 3 developers who tried shady land deals. She's mean about it, Walter. Real mean. Walter looked at his documentation. 12 pages had become 40. Phone records, property filings, LLC registrations, text message timelines, all of it cross-referenced and dated. His father's voice in his head. Do it once. Do it right. What do I do now? Walter asked. Keep documenting. I'll keep digging. And Walter, get Bill to help you request those official phone records. Not screenshots. Official carrier records with metadata. If this goes to court, you want everything airtight. They hung up. Walter sat at the kitchen table with 40 pages of evidence laid out in front of him. Linda's betrayal wasn't impulse. It wasn't even just an affair. It was a business plan. And he was the obstacle to profitability. Through the guest room wall, her voice drifted down, laughing. Soft and young-sounding. Talking to Dennis Morrison, probably. Planning the next steps. April 15th was 6 weeks away. The hearing that would decide whether his father's farm became Meadowbrook Estates. Walter added Art's information to his log. Dennis Michael Morrison, developer, Linda's old boss. The DM from 247 text messages. Some puzzles came together all at once. Some betrayals revealed themselves in layers, each one deeper than the last. Walter had just hit bedrock, and it was colder down there than he'd imagined. 3 weeks crawled by like wounded animals. Linda's lawyer sent papers, thick envelope, law firm letterhead, petition for dissolution of marriage, informal language that made 40 years sound like a business, contract being terminated. She wanted 60% of the farm's assessed value, spousal support, half the retirement accounts. The papers laid it out in numbered paragraphs, clinical and cold. She left them on the kitchen table, didn't hand them to Walter, just left them there like a note about picking up groceries. He photographed every page, added them to his documentation. Linda was confident now. He could see it in how she moved through the house. Shopping bags from stores in Carmel, new clothes, hair freshly colored. She'd started going to the gym, came home in expensive workout gear. She was getting ready for something, or someone. Walter tracked it all, times she left, odometer readings when she came back. 43 miles round trip usually. Same as the distance to Morrison's office address Art had found. Some investigations didn't need a detective, just a man who paid attention. The courthouse hearing was set, April 12th, 3 days before the subdivision approval deadline. Linda's lawyer had timed it perfectly. Rebecca called on a Saturday, Walter's daughter. She was 38 now, worked as a dental hygienist, had 2 kids, his grandkids. Dad, can we meet? Just us. Mom doesn't need to know. They met at a coffee shop in the next town over. Neutral ground. Rebecca looked tired, worried. Mom's been talking to me, she said, about the divorce. Her version. I figured. She says you're being unreasonable, that she just wants her fair share, that you're trying to keep everything out of spite. Walter pulled out a folder. The edited version of his documentation. Phone records, subdivision plat, LLC registration. Not everything. Rebecca didn't need to know about late-night conversations through walls, but enough to show the truth. She read it slowly. Her face changed when she got to the subdivision plat. She was going to sell Grandpa's farm without telling you? Already filed the paperwork. April 15th, approval hearing. Rebecca set the papers down. Her hands were shaking slightly. Dad, I didn't know. She told me you two were just growing apart, that it was mutual, that the property stuff was just standard divorce things. It's not mutual, and it's not standard. Dennis Morrison. Rebecca tapped the LLC registration age. She mentioned him, said he was an old friend helping with financial planning. I thought... She stopped, looked at her father. I'm sorry, I should have asked you sooner. You were trying to stay neutral, that's fair. No, Rebecca's voice was firm. It's not fair. You're my father, and she's been coaching me to take her side without telling me the whole story. That's not neutral. That's manipulation. She closed the folder, pushed it back across the table. Nathan and Emma can come visit on Saturdays again, starting next week. I'll bring them myself. Linda might not like that. I don't really care what Linda likes right now. Rebecca's jaw was set. She looked like her grandfather in that moment, stubborn, principled. She lied to me, used her own grandkids, that's done. They talked for another hour. Rebecca asked about the hearing. Walter explained Bill's evidence preparation, Art's research, the timeline. She listened carefully, asked good questions. When they left, she hugged him. First time in months. You're going to be okay, Dad. Walter nodded. Wasn't sure he believed it yet. But hearing his daughter say it helped. The nights were the hardest. Walter would lie awake listening to silence now. Linda had stopped talking through the wall. Maybe she'd gone somewhere else. Maybe Morrison's place. Walter didn't know and didn't want to. He walked the property lines every morning, 5:30, before dawn. Touched his father's original boundary markers, iron stakes from 1947 still standing true. The survey stakes were gone now. Walter had pulled them all out, photographed the holes, documented their removal. His land, his boundaries, his to defend. He found his father's old survey transit in the barn. Brass and steel, mechanical, no electronics, 70 years old and still accurate. Walter set it up one morning, checked the sight lines. Perfect. They built things to last back then. Built them right. The April morning 3 days before the hearing, Walter found something under the refrigerator. Nathan's drawing from months ago. Crayon survey map of the farm. Every building labeled in careful printing. Grandpa's place. Written in the corner. The paper was wrinkled, edges worn. But the colors were still bright. Red barn, green fields, brown fence post. A child's faith that good things stayed standing. Walter smoothed it out, folded it careful, put it in his jacket pocket, next to his documentation folder. Some things you defend because they're yours. Some things you defend because someone young believes they'll last. The hearing was Tuesday. 3 days away. Art had the evidence organized. Bill had verified chain of custody on everything. Jean had called twice, said nothing much, just checking in. Linda was confident. Walter could feel it. She thought she had this one, thought he'd roll over like he always had. Quiet Walter, steady Walter. Walter who never made waves. Monday night, Walter sat at the kitchen table. Documentation spread out one more time. 47 pages now. Every date, every document, every lie traced back to its source. His father's voice. Do it once, do it right, do it so it holds up when somebody checks your work. Tuesday morning, somebody was going to check his work. Walter figured it would hold up just fine. He made coffee. 4 scoops, let it brew strong. Drank it black while darkness gave way to gray dawn outside the kitchen window. In the barn, his father's transit sat ready. In his pocket, Nathan's crayon map. In his truck, 47 pages of truth. Some boundaries you draw with iron stakes. Some you draw with ink on paper. Some you draw with the simple act of standing up when someone tries to push you down. Walter had spent 3 weeks measuring, 3 weeks documenting, 3 weeks learning that silence only works if the person you're staying silent for deserves it. Linda didn't deserve it anymore. Tuesday was here, time to show his work. The county courthouse was limestone, built in 1898. Marble steps worn smooth from a century of people carrying their troubles up into those halls. Walter climbed them at 8:30 Tuesday morning, Art and Bill flanking him, Jean right behind. Judge Marianne Keller's courtroom was oak-paneled, high-ceilinged, smelled like furniture polish and old law books. Walter sat at the plaintiff's table with his lawyer, a younger man Art had recommended, steady and thorough. Linda was already there. Different table, 10 feet away. Her lawyer was James Bradford, expensive suit, polished shoes. Linda wore a navy dress, pearls. Looked like she was going to church, not court. She didn't look at Walter, not once. Judge Keller came in. Everyone stood. She was 54, gray hair pulled back, reading glasses on a chain, no preamble. Just sat down and said, "Let's proceed." Bradford went first, stood up smooth and confident. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward dissolution case. Mrs. Hutchins has been a devoted wife for 38 years. She gave up her career to support her husband's work, to raise their family, to maintain their home. She's not asking for anything unreasonable, simply her fair shares of the marital assets they built together." He painted a picture. Linda the faithful spouse. Walter the stubborn farmer refusing to adapt. The Meadowbrook development as a shared opportunity that Walter had sabotaged out of spite. "Mrs. Hutchins simply wants to move forward with dignity," Bradford said, "to receive what she's entitled to under Indiana law. She's requesting 60% of the property value, reflecting her contributions and Mr. Hutchins' unwillingness to cooperate with reasonable financial planning." Linda dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Perfect timing. Bradford sat down. Judge Keller looked at Walter's lawyer. "Mr. Chen?" Chen stood, quieter than Bradford, but his voice carried. "Your Honor, Mrs. Hutchins isn't telling the complete story. We have documentation that changes the nature of these proceedings significantly." He approached the bench with Walter's evidence binder, 2 inches thick, tabs color-coded, everything Art and Bill had helped organize. Phone records showing over 2,000 text messages between Mrs. Hutchins and Dennis Michael Morrison over 8 months. Mr. Morrison is the registered agent for Meadowbrook Development, LLC, the same company listed on the subdivision plat Mrs. Hutchins filed without her husband's knowledge. Judge Keller put on her reading glasses, started going through the binder. Chen continued, "The subdivision plat was filed 8 weeks ago, using Mrs. Hutchins' signature alone, despite Mr. Hutchins being co-owner on the deed. The approval hearing is scheduled for April 15th, 3 days from now. 7 lots, projected sales of $4 million. Mr. Morrison's company stands to profit substantially. Bradford stood up. Your Honor, this is character assassination. Judge Keller held up one hand, kept reading. The courtroom went silent except for pages turning. She read for 10 minutes straight. Phone records. LLC registration. Subdivision plat. Timeline documentation showing text message spikes corresponding with filing deadlines. When she removed her reading glasses, the click echoed in the quiet room. Bradford shifted in his seat. Linda's tissue stopped moving. Mrs. Hutchins, Judge Keller said. Her voice was flat, dangerous flat. Did you file a subdivision plat for property you co-own without your husband's knowledge or consent? Linda looked at Bradford. He stood up. Your Honor, Mrs. Hutchins is on the deed. She has every legal right to explore development options. I asked Mrs. Hutchins a direct question, Mr. Bradford. Linda stood. Her voice was smaller than before. I requested a preliminary survey. That's not illegal. On a preliminary survey with lot numbers, price projections, and an approval hearing in 3 days? Silence. And Mr. Dennis Morrison. How long have you known him? He's an old colleague. He offered professional guidance. 2,000 text messages in 8 months. Many sent late at night. That's quite a bit of professional guidance. Judge Keller looked at Bradford. Your client coordinated a property subdivision with a romantic partner using marital assets without co-owner consent. Is that your defense? Bradford requested a recess. His confidence had evaporated like morning dew. Judge Keller granted 30 minutes. The hallway was cooler. Walter stood by the window while Art and Bill talked quietly nearby. Jean just stood there, solid as a fence post. Down the hall, Linda was crying. Not sad tears, angry ones. Bradford was talking fast, hands moving. Through the glass, Walter could see Dennis Morrison leaving through the side exit. Quick steps. Didn't look back. Rebecca appeared from somewhere. Put her hand on Walter's arm. You okay, Dad? Don't know yet. You did good in there. Walter looked at his daughter, then at Art and Bill and Jean. At 47 pages of documentation that had held up under scrutiny. At truth, that couldn't be argued with because it was measured right. We'll see, he said. Judge Keller's clerk came out. She's ready. They filed back in. Linda's eyes were red. Her lawyer looked like a man who'd just watched his case collapse. Judge Keller didn't sit down. I'll have a ruling in 72 hours. Mr. Chen, Mr. Bradford, you'll receive written notice. Court is adjourned. Gavel down. Walter walked down those marble steps into April afternoon light. Behind him, through courthouse windows, Linda was still in the hallway with Bradford, gesturing sharply. He didn't look back. Some people you stop seeing long before they leave. Jean clapped his shoulder. Art nodded. Bill said, well, that went well. Walter got in his truck, started the engine, drove home with empty roads and clear sky and 3 days to wait for a judge's decision. But he'd shown his work, measured it right, let truth speak for itself. That was all a man could do. The rest was up to people who knew how to read boundaries. The envelope came Friday. 3 days, like Judge Keller promised. Official seal, county courthouse letterhead. Walter stood by the mailbox holding it for a full minute before he walked back to the house. Art and Bill were already there, sitting in their trucks in the driveway. Like they'd been waiting. Maybe they had been. Walter held up the envelope. They got out, followed him inside. Jean pulled up 5 minutes later. Nobody had called him. He just knew. Walter opened the envelope at the kitchen table. 4 men standing around while he read legal language that would determine whether his father's farm stayed his father's farm. The ruling was 8 pages. Walter read it twice, then handed it to Art. Art read it aloud. The court finds that Mrs. Linda Hutchins engaged in fraudulent conduct regarding marital property, specifically filing subdivision plans without co-owner consent, coordinating with a third-party developer for personal financial gain, and misrepresenting said actions during dissolution proceedings. Art looked up, kept reading. Property fraud vitiates claims of equitable distribution. Therefore, Mr. Walter Hutchins retains full ownership of the 140-acre property and primary residence. Mrs. Hutchins is awarded $47,000 as settlement, calculated from her documented non-fraudulent financial contributions to the marriage. No spousal support is awarded due to fraudulent intent. Mrs. Hutchins has 30 days to vacate the premises. Silence in the kitchen, just the refrigerator humming and the clock ticking on the wall. Bill spoke first. You won. Walter sat down. Yeah. Judge Keller tore her apart in the reasoning section, Art said, still reading. Listen to this. The court notes, with particular disfavor, the defendant's attempt to portray coordinated property fraud as mere financial planning. Such conduct undermines the integrity of marital property law and will not be rewarded in this court. Jean made a sound that might have been a laugh. She really doesn't like property fraud. Told you, Art said. Walter looked at the ruling. At 8 pages that said his father's farm wouldn't become Meadowbrook Estates. That 70-year-old walnut trees would stay standing. That Nathan's crayon map, Grandpa's place, was still accurate. He should feel something. Victory, maybe. Relief. Mostly he just felt tired. "I need to call Rebecca," he said. Art nodded. "We'll give you space." "No." Walter stood up. "Stay, please." So they stayed while he called his daughter, told her the ruling, heard her voice break with relief on the other end. "Can we come tomorrow? Bring the kids?" "Yeah, that'd be good." After he hung up, Bill made coffee. 4 cups. Nobody said much. Didn't need to. They'd been meeting Tuesday mornings for 15 years. Knew how to sit with a man when words weren't the point. Art finally spoke. "Linda's got 30 days. She'll probably move faster." "Probably. You want us here when she does?" Walter thought about it, shook his head. "No, this is between her and me, what's left of it." Gene squeezed his shoulder. Same rough grip as always. "You did good, Walter. Your dad would be proud." That's when Walter felt it. Not victory, not relief, just a quiet certainty that he'd done what needed doing. Measured the boundaries. Showed the work. Let truth speak. His father would have done the same. Linda moved out in 6 days. Didn't take the full 30. U-Haul in the driveway on Thursday morning. 2 young men loading furniture. Walter watched from the porch. Didn't help, didn't hinder. Just watched his wife of 38 years pack up like they'd been roommates. Not partners. She took the guest room furniture. Her clothes. Some kitchen things. The TV from the living room. Left the wedding photos. Left the quilt her mother made them. Left 40 years like it was something you could just walk away from with a security deposit. No final conversation. She left the keys on the kitchen counter. Didn't say goodbye. The U-Haul pulled out at 2:15. Walter stood at the window and watched it go down the driveway. Turn onto Route 36, disappear into April afternoon. The house felt different immediately. Not lighter, exactly, just different, like the walls had been holding their breath and could finally exhale. Walter changed the locks that afternoon. All the doors. New deadbolt on the front. New padlock on the barn, bright brass that caught the light. His house, his land, his locks. The guest room door stood open. Empty walls, bare mattress. Sun coming through the window where Linda's things used to block it. Walter closed the door, left it closed. Some rooms you don't need anymore. That night, he made coffee. Started to reach for the percolator, then stopped. Looked at it, sitting there on the shelf. 4 scoops, 40 years, the ritual of it. But that was Linda's coffee too, their coffee. The morning routine of a marriage that didn't exist anymore. Walter took down the basic pot from the back of the cabinet. Made coffee the simple way, 4 scoops. Same amount, just a different method. It tasted fine, maybe better. Hard to tell if that was the coffee or just the fact that he could drink it without listening through walls. The house settled around him. Old wood creaking, furnace cycling. Familiar sounds, without the weight of waiting for her footsteps, her voice, her presence, that had become more absence than anything. Walter sat at the kitchen table until dark, then sat some more. Lonely? Yeah, but honest lonely. The kind you could live with because it wasn't pretending to be something else. Tuesday morning, 7 a.m., Kowalski's Diner. Walter pulled into the lot. 3 trucks already there. Art's sedan, Bill's F-150, Gene's old Dodge. He walked in, the booth by the window. 4 men instead of 1 man, hiding among 3. Barb brought 4 coffees. Set down 4 slices of pie without being asked. Apple. Cinnamon steam rising. Heard about the ruling, she said. Glad it worked out right. She walked away before Walter could respond. Small town care delivered in pie, in knowing when not to make a fuss. Art raised his coffee cup. Didn't say anything, just raised it. Bill and Gene did the same. Walter raised his. They drank coffee. Ate pie. Talked about Gene's water pump finally being replaced. About Bill's granddaughter making honor roll. About the road crews on Route 36 doing the same patchwork they'd done last year. Normal conversation. Tuesday morning rhythms. The comfortable silence of men who'd stood beside each other when standing beside mattered. When they were leaving, Art said casual like, Rebecca mentioned bringing the kids Saturday for planting. Garden needs tilling, Walter said. Gardens always need something, Gene added with a half smile. They headed to their trucks, still meeting next Tuesday. Some things didn't change, just because other things did. Walter sat in his cab for a minute, looked at the diner, at 3 trucks driven by 3 men who'd given him a legal pad, a plan, and the reminder that asking for help wasn't weakness. His phone buzzed. Text from Rebecca. Kids want to know what vegetables you're planting. Emma says she wants tomatoes. Walter typed back, tomatoes it is. See you Saturday 9 a.m. He started the truck. Drove home to an empty house that was honestly empty now. No pretending. No voices through walls. No survey stakes in his father's trees, just quiet, just space. Just the work of figuring out what came next. The farm was his, the boundaries held. Nathan's crayon map was still accurate. Some victories were hollow, some were just honest. Walter figured this was the second kind. And honest, he could live with. Saturday morning came with clear skies and warming ground. First real spring day after a winter that had lasted longer than seasons usually do. Rebecca pulled up at 9 with Nathan and Emma. The kids tumbled out of the car before she'd even turned off the engine, Nathan carrying a notebook. Emma with gardening gloves too big for her hands. Walter was waiting by the barn, tiller already out. Garden plot marked with string lines running straight and true. "Grandpa!" Emma ran up and hugged his legs. 7 years old and all energy. Nathan was more careful, hung back a little, like he wasn't sure if things were okay now or just pretending to be okay. Walter knelt down, looked his grandson in the eye. "You did right telling me," he said. "Secrets like that aren't yours to carry, never were." Nathan's shoulders dropped, relief visible. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." "You told me when you could, that's enough." The boy nodded, looked lighter, somehow. Like a weight he'd been carrying for months finally got set down. Rebecca stood by her car, watching. Walter met her eyes. She smiled. Real one. Not the careful kind she'd been using since Christmas. "What are we planting?" Emma asked, bouncing on her toes. "Tomatoes, beans, couple rows of corn if we've got time." "Where?" Walter pointed to the northwest corner, where Linda's survey stakes had been, where Meadowbrook Estates was supposed to start. "Right there. That's good soil. Gets full sun." They spent the morning turning earth. Walter ran the tiller first, breaking up ground that hadn't been worked in years. Then Nathan helped mark the rows. 12 inches between plants, measured with a wooden ruler that had been Walter's father's. "Why's it got to be exactly 12 inches? Emma asked. Walter knelt between them. "Things grow better when they've got proper room, not too crowded, not too far apart, and because your great-grandpa taught me this way. Now I'm teaching you." Nathan held the string line taut while Walter placed the first marker. Emma followed behind with seedlings, setting them gentle in the holes they'd dug. The work was simple, physical, the kind of thing that quiets the mind because your hands are too busy to let it wander. Rebecca brought lemonade at 11. They sat on the porch steps while the kids ran around the yard. "How are you doing, Dad?" "Really?" Walter watched Nathan chasing Emma around the garden plot, careful not to step on the new plantings. Good kids, respectful of things that were trying to grow. "Lonely?" he said. "But okay, those can both be true." "Yeah, they can." They sat quiet for a while. Comfortable silence. The kind family earns through showing up when showing up is hard. "Art mentioned Barbara Henley from church," Rebecca said, careful-like. "Mom's been gone 3 weeks now. It's okay if I'm not ready." "Okay. May never be." "That's okay too." Walter nodded. His daughter understood. Some people wanted rescue. Some people just wanted space to figure out who they were without the weight of who they'd been with. Walter was the second kind. Tuesday morning came around again. This time Walter brought Nathan. The boy sat at the booth between Walter and Jean, looking small among grown men, but trying to sit tall anyway. Barb brought 5 coffees, looked at Nathan, went back and brought hot chocolate instead. Whipped cream on top, didn't charge for it. "You know what a property line is?" Art asked Nathan. "Grandpa's teaching me. It's the edge where one person's land ends and another's starts." "That's right. And you know how we find those lines?" Nathan pulled out his notebook, showed art sketches he'd been making. Crude, but careful. Fence posts, corner markers, trees used as reference points. Art studied them serious. "These are good, real good. You've got an eye for detail." The boy beamed. Bill leaned over. "See this map?" He unfolded a topographic survey. "These wavy lines show elevation. Close together means steep. Far apart means flat. Can you tell where the hill is?" Nathan studied it, pointed. "There?" "Exactly right." Jean didn't say much, just watched the boy learn. But when Nathan asked about his truck engine, why it sounded different from Rebecca's car, Jean explained, "Diesel versus gas for 10 minutes. Patient, thorough." The most words Walter had heard him speak at one sitting. They sat there for an hour, 4 men and 1 boy, passing down knowledge that didn't seem important until you needed it. Then it became the difference between knowing your place in the world and wandering lost. When they left, Art said to Walter, "Bring him regular, if you want." He'd like that. So would we. In the parking lot, Nathan looked up at Walter. "Are those your best friends?" Walter thought about it. 15 years of Tuesday mornings. A legal pad when he needed one. Standing beside him in a courthouse, teaching his grandson without being asked. "Yeah," he said. "I guess they are." "That's good. Everybody should have friends." Out of the mouths of 10-year-olds. Wednesday morning, 5:30. Walter walked the property line, coffee in a travel mug. New pot, same 4 scoops, some rituals adapted. Spring was happening, he could feel it in the air. Robin song from the walnut trees. Green showing in the grass. That warming earth smell that promised things were waking up. He touched his father's original boundary markers. Iron stakes from 1947, still standing true. Still marking what was his to keep, his to protect, his to pass on. The barn caught early light. New padlock, bright brass. His choice, his lock, his land. No survey stakes, no subdivision plans. No voices through walls, just morning, just quiet, just the work of living forward into whatever came next. Walter stopped at this garden plot. The tomato seedlings were already reaching for light, small and green and determined. Give them a few months, they'd be heavy with fruit. Give them proper care and room, they'd do what they were meant to do. Same as anything, really. He thought about Nathan's drawing still on the refrigerator. Grandpa's place in crayon letters. A child's certainty that good things lasted if you took care of them. The kid wasn't wrong. Linda was gone. Marriage was over. Those were facts, hard and permanent, but the land was still here. The grandkids were coming back. Tuesday mornings were holding. Some things broke, some things bent but held. The trick was knowing which was which and not wasting time trying to fix what was already past fixing. Walter finished his coffee as sun cleared the tree line. Gold light on new green grass. His father's trees standing tall. The barn his grandfather built in 1952. 80 years of family, still rooted. He figured that was legacy, not perfection, not permanent happiness. Just showing up, doing the work, keeping the boundaries true, passing something down that was worth receiving. The garden rows ran straight, 12 inches between plants, measured twice. Nathan had held the string line without being told, remembered the lesson from one showing. The spring ground was soft enough for roots to take hold. Walter figured that applied to more than tomatoes. He walked back to the house as morning took hold. Empty house, yeah, but empty in a way that felt clean now, honest. Room to breathe, without wondering what was happening in the next room, what was being planned, what was being hidden. Some losses revealed what was already gone. Some boundaries held because they were drawn true in the first place. The farm would be here when Nathan was ready for it. The knowledge would pass, the land would stay. That was enough. More than enough. That was everything that mattered. There's something about dawn that tells the truth. Maybe it's the quiet. Maybe it's the light coming slow and honest. No drama. Just showing what's there. Walter stood on his porch with coffee steaming in the morning cold. Late April now. The kind of morning his father used to call working weather. Clear enough to see what you're doing. Cool enough to do it without stopping every 10 minutes. The northwest quadrant was green with new growth. Tomato plants reaching. Bean vines climbing the stakes Nathan had helped set. Where Meadowbrook Estates was supposed to be, there was just garden. Just food growing for family. Just earth doing what earth does when you let it. His father's walnut trees stood beyond the garden. 72 years old now, older than Walter. They'd be standing long after he was gone too. That's what legacy was, he figured. Not something you owned, something you kept for a while and passed along. The brass padlock on the barn caught first light. New lock, his choice. Small thing, maybe. But small things added up to a life you could live with, or a life that slowly hollowed you out from the inside. Walter had spent 63 years learning that lesson. Wished he'd learned it sooner. But late learning was still learning. Linda was gone. That was a fact, hard and permanent as iron stakes. The marriage was over, another fact. Some nights the loneliness sat heavy. Some mornings he woke up and forgot she'd left. Reached for coffee routine that included 2 cups instead of 1. But he wasn't pretending anymore. Wasn't listening through walls. Wasn't carrying secrets that weren't his to carry. The loneliness was real, but it was honest. And honest, a man could live with. Rebecca and the kids came Saturdays. Nathan was learning to read property maps. Emma was learning that tomatoes didn't grow overnight no matter how much you wanted them to. Simple lessons. The kind that mattered more than the complicated ones schools tried to teach. Tuesday mornings held. Art and Bill and Jean, same booth, same coffee. Now with Nathan learning alongside them sometimes. Masculine wisdom passed the old way. Through showing, not telling. Through standing beside, not standing over. There was a widow from church. Barbara Henley. Art had mentioned her twice now. Nice woman, Art said. Lost her husband 3 years back. Might be good to have coffee sometime. Walter had said he wasn't ready. Still true? Might always be true? But the fact that he could imagine it someday, that was something. Not hope, exactly. Just the recognition that closed doors sometimes open again if you didn't nail them shut. The sun cleared the tree line, gold light on green grass, robin song from the walnut trees, his father's boundary markers still standing true after 78 years. The land solid under his feet. Some things you build to last, some things you build to pass on. Some things you just protect while they're in your care, knowing you're part of a chain longer than your own life. Walter Hutchins had protected what mattered, lost some things, kept others, learned the difference between silence that protected and silence that enabled, between loneliness that destroyed and loneliness that was just space for healing. His father used to say, "A man who knows his boundaries knows himself." Walter knew his boundaries now. Knew them better than he had in 63 years. The lands, the laws, his own. And he knew one more thing. Dignity wasn't something given. It was something defended when necessary, maintained through quiet action, and passed down through the simple act of showing up and doing what was right, even when right was hard. The coffee was bitter and strong and exactly what he needed. The morning was cold and clear and full of work. The land was his to keep, his to tend, his to pass on. That was enough. Some days that was everything.